All right. Welcome everybody to this webinar. Unfortunately, Adriano couldn't make it with us today, but he was kind enough to connect online. It was kind of last minute, so thank you for those who came in person. Josefa is there, Kathy is there, and we'll make it as interactive as we can. We, as you know, as a group, have broad interests. Most of us work in the public sector, healthcare. Today, we are looking at something that takes, I would say, a broader perspective on the state of politics, with a look at the title of the talk. But Dr. Tedde will talk about Donald Trump and the triumph of the neoliberal power politics. Definitely important, not only for the US, as clearly everything has changed since the new president took power, for healthcare and for a number of other crucial sectors that stem from foreign policy to trade policy and so on and so forth, which are clearly very important public interest issues. So once again, let me welcome Adriano for joining us and share some of his work with us. I'd like to thank him very warmly. I met Adriano Tedde, I believe, already in 2007 when I first came to Australia to work in Canberra. He was there, I think, in one of his first appointments for the Foreign Service of Italy. I had the pleasure to interact also in research made by Italians in a few of those communities to actually look at how the work of people from Italy stood out in the Australian context. So that was a great occasion to develop a very strong connection with him and his work. Since then, he moved to other location in his foreign affairs diplomatic work, and then recently completed a PhD and with Griffith University in American Studies, after having completing an MA in Foreign Affairs from ISPI in Milan. He's been a visiting scholar for a number of universities in Australia and overseas, including Colombia, and is currently lecturing in Strategic and American Study at the Center for Future Defense and National Security at Deakin University. So I'd like to welcome Adriano, who will, of course, speak more deeply about the topic he's presenting. Adriano, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. The title contains the name of the US president, but really this is an excuse to talk about something else. I want to use his name to talk about the current state of the ideology that goes under the name of neoliberalism. So these are the points that I will touch. I will begin with Donald Trump and US politics briefly, since this is where I bring my rudimental preliminary argument. And then I will define neoliberalism and its legacy in today's politics, and the link that this legacy has with a series of crises, most of all the crisis of the so-called international liberal order. And then I will consider, one possible solution, more than a solution, it's a dream, for the different problems that I will talk about. And we'll conclude with a brief description of what neoliberalism might mean. So as you can see, this is not uplifting. It's almost dinner time for us in Australia. So you might want to grab a beer or some food if you want to stick around, for everybody who's online, and listen to what I want to say tonight. So we begin with the big guy, with Trump. We are told that we are going through the end of an era, and we don't know exactly what's coming next. We worry about a lot of different problems. One is the problem that I mentioned before, this decline or even dismantling of the current world order. And then we're told that there are new unpredictable powers rising, and we're worried about power politics, and we're worried about the concrete risk of military conflict as well. And somehow we think that all or most of these problems are connected because Donald Trump is the president of the United States at the moment. And the media tell us this unpredictable, crazy man is an anomaly in 250 years of democracy. He's breaking up with all the norms that America set up in over 250 years of the Republican experience. I argue the opposite, that Trump is not an anomaly, that he is indeed a man of our times, and he is the natural point of arrival of a political age that began in the United States, probably with Ronald Reagan, if not before with Richard Nixon. So Donald Trump is not a loose cannon, a random variable that history can't explain. Rather, he operates in continuity with his predecessors. And this is the basic argument that I expressed in a short analysis piece that was published in March, and Francesco read it and invited me to talk about it tonight, to elaborate my argument. Some of my colleagues didn't agree with me, but early this month, that argument was validated somehow by an American scholar called Samuel Moyen, who wrote this piece for The Guardian on, again, early in July. And he says, Trump is far more a politician of American continuity with the past 50 years than many originally feared or hoped. He says that after two major events that occurred after I published my little piece, and those are the adoption of the big and beautiful bill in domestic policy in the United States, and the other one is the military attack on Iran in June. According to Moyen, the first, the big beautiful bill, is, he says, a monument to neoliberalism, with its payoff to the rich and punishment to the poor. And the second is an illegal military action that brings the neoconservative Americans back into the camp of Donald Trump after they abandoned it to support Joe Biden's militarism last year. So those two events, if we look at them, are telling us that America is very much on track with its values and its core principles and interests. So America hasn't lost its way with Trump. And with those two events, we see that, again, there are two major ideas that Trump is defending, like his predecessors. One is the idea that when rich people get richer, America thrives. And the other one is this persistent idea that America needs to maintain its hegemony, its supremacy in the world. And that supremacy is today threatened by the rise of new powers. So, seen under this light, Trump continues on the path of power politics that America has adopted since the end of the Cold War during the so-called unipolarity times. The only exception that I think the presidency of Donald Trump represents, when we compare him with his predecessors, is in his bold, crude, rudimental, direct language. A language that is filled with threats, and it's full of misinformation and lies. We know that. But apart from that, I think, as I said before, he does what all the other presidents did before him. But the other presidents adopted a power politics, basically, using a different language, using a more reassuring, comforting rhetoric, the rhetoric of the democracy expert, the rhetoric of the human rights, the protection of the rules-based order, the promotion of self-determination of peoples, and so on. Trump freed us from that hypocritical rhetoric with this brutal language, and he has the ability to pronounce things that shouldn't be pronounced, the unpronounceable. And we gasp in shock, in horror, every time he makes these big America First announcements. And every time he dismisses international law and a series of norms in the UN and other international institutions. But again, this is not something new. Here is a piece of literature that tells us exactly how, for 80 years, America always had some problems, some problematic relations with this beautiful thing that America actually helped create, which is the multilateral international liberal order or system. So there is nothing new under the sun apart from the rhetoric with Trump. What I want to say is that what I'm pronouncing here are not words that we can label as anti-American. This is not anti-Americanism. I truly believe that if there is one place in the world that can find some solutions, some answers to the problems that I just mentioned, that's America. A country where there's a strong intellectual community, and traditionally, that's the country of the civil disobedience. It's the country of alternative political thinking. And it's a country that has always existed in contradiction with its own values. One of those values is freedom. And the history of America is a history of tension between two different conceptions of freedom. One is the freedom to, and the other one is the freedom from. And for, we could say, 5 decades, a good 50 years now, freedom to has prevailed. Freedom has become the currency with which conservative actors in the US, but also in many other parts of the world, have shaped the political ecosphere. Freedom to do whatever we want. This is what they promised us. You can do whatever you want. And now we hear new voices that are disorderly trying to ask for something different, ask for some freedom from need, freedom from inequality, freedom from injustice, freedom from disinformation. And media tend to address these voices, these requests, usually as populist. And indeed, some of those requests were channeled into the Trump political campaign, political triumph. But mostly, those voices really are desperately seeking for a new form of political leaderships. Political leaderships that can break with, again, the past 50 years, the way politics has been conducted for the past 5 decades. Now, we don't know where those voices will lead, if there will be a clash between these two concepts that I mentioned, freedom to and freedom from. But what we can appreciate is what has happened until now, and where the world that we live in comes from, and where our problems come from. To conclude this part about America, this is a wonderful short book by Andrew Del Banco that came out 25 years ago and is still valid. It's an analysis on the erosion of trust in democracy, erosion of trust in public institutions, and the disappearance of what Americans for a long time called civic religion, well represented in that image of George Washington. That's a fresco in the American Congress in Washington, where you see God, all the saints, and Washington is there in paradise, the civic religion, so the sacrality of the republic. Well, Del Banco says in the 1960s and then in the 1980s, two trends emerged clearly. And those trends are the repudiation of state as a source of hope and change, and the installation of instant gratification as the hallmark of good life. Now, in the 1990s, these trends kept on growing in the so-called era of the globalization. And in the 21st century, in the past 20 years probably, the digital transformation, the digital technology has amplified those trends and generated great economic returns, but also some dramatic social effects. One of those effects is the post-truth reality that allows demagogues like Trump to win elections pronouncing open lies. So erosion of trust in the institutions, the crisis of democracy, and finally the risk of conflict, as I said before, are effects of a long march that began more than a century ago. And Trump is part of it, but is not the president that's created all this problem. Those problems, again, are part of this long march that we can call neoliberalism. And this is the point where I want to get. So what is neoliberalism? There are many ways to describe this economic or political doctrine. To me, neoliberalism is a silent revolution, the biggest cultural revolution of our times. That began timidly as a debate among economists. It started when the European Central Empires started to crumble and then collapsed finally with World War I. In Austria, a school, the Austrian Economics School, formulated a series of important theories with men who were basically horrified, like Franz Kafka probably, by the incredible, gigantic, crashing bureaucracy of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And basically, they formulated a series of theories in which they said the state is an obstacle to freedom. The most important thinker in the school is Friedrich von Hayek. Hayek, in this book and many other books, formulated, I will simplify to the extreme here, the idea that the private sector, with its corporations, is the most efficient way to generate progress, wealth, growth, happiness, basically. And the public sector, the state, is an obstacle to the freedom of those organizations that we call corporations. And as such, the state must be reformed, must be restrained, remodeled, and kept to the smallest minimum size to guarantee, again, growth, progress that only the private sector can generate. Now, with time, these ideas became the mainstream ideas. basically, thanks to a series of fine arguments and theories and good communication by a series of politicians and fine minds that were able to turn neoliberalism into a formidable political project. A silent revolution, as I said before. A project that started with a brave man and a brave woman, an Adam and Eve in a fantastic story of success. They had an idea, they followed it, and they triumphed. They won, and they generated a big family. They had children. And then the family expanded with uncles and aunties and friends and grandchildren here and there, and it continues on and on. And now you're wondering, what is this madness? You're showing us a series of very different politicians who hate each other. They even fight each other. They represent different values. But believe me, like in all families, there is something that links all these people together. And that's a common message that was filtered through from, again, the ancestors down to the youngest generation. And it's a very basic message that is voiced here in this short video. I'll try to play it. I don't know if you will be able to hear it. You may not be able to hear it. I'll just report what's in here. You saw the face of Elon Musk. I don't want to attract any attention to him now, but this is a short video where you can hear him pronouncing some important words that a lot of people agree with. The majority of people agree with. You see the face of Musk here, but it could be anyone else. Anyone else. He says, government is the most corporate thing. It's maximum corporation. It's a monopoly, a corporation with no competition. And then he asks, why would you give this type of corporation more money? In other words, he's saying, why do we tolerate taxation that goes into wasteful activities, like employing inefficient public servants, for example? And this is the message, again, that was filtered down from Thatcher and Reagan onto our days. And we have absorbed this message, and we all believe that basically the state can be run like a corporation. This is what links all these people together. The firm idea that state, like a corporation, can be an agile, efficient, debt-free organization. And this is possible to a series of policies or reforms that took different names over time, like deregulation, devolution, privatization, and then the so-called austerity, economic measures. So for decades, we've been told that this is the way forward to growth, prosperity, to progress. And now we know, after decades of neoliberal economic policies, we know that the economic recipe was wrong, didn't really succeed. But still, governments still propose those ideas. Why? So what if neoliberalism had nothing to do with economic rigor? What if neoliberalism were conceived as a powerful instrument of social control, created within the liberal democratic tradition, but an instrument that is so powerful that no other totalitarian regimes were able to produce apart from liberal democracies, and an instrument that is conducive to authoritarianism. So years and years of unquestioned belief in the importance of economic growth, the centrality of the economics in our public life, have produced the words that Elon Musk pronounces in that video. Culturally and socially, neoliberalism generated a tectonic shift in the way we understand state, society, our role as citizens. So neoliberalism hasn't changed simply the way we adopt economic policies, but it has changed us profoundly. We were told that we are alone, that we are individuals, each one with their own interests and material interests, practical interests, and there is no such thing as society, like Margaret Thatcher said several times. We were told that we need to take care of our own interests, and we can do that through the markets, mostly the stock markets. The state liberates those resources through taxation cuts and the dismantling of social policies. And we're able to thrive as individuals. And if we don't, then it's our own fault because we're not good enough within this magical place, the market. We're not good enough in looking after our own individual interests. And this is a Darwinian concept of society based on competition and the idea of the survival of the fittest. So the magic that the neoliberalism worked is that while working against the well-being and the interests of the masses, the people who are now angry and impoverished and vote for Trump, this philosophy, this political doctrine won the hearts and minds of the masses, depriving them of their unity, their strength to contrast iniquitous policies. This is, for example, explained in this book by an economist called Clara Mattei. It's a history of austerity. And she writes, austerity is wrong economic policy based on wrong economic theory that has never succeeded in achieving its stated ends. So this is a history of economic failure that responds to a political agenda. That is the belief that the markets are more important than democratic decision-making. They're more important than the state. And economic freedom is more important than political freedom. That is the freedom to manage the economy democratically. The economy then prevails over politics. Economic and private interests become more important than political goals of common good and public welfare. And this is possible thanks again to that powerful word that we all love, freedom. Freedom. So we were told that all this was, cutting the red tape and becoming free from this terrible thing that is the state, the government. So neoliberal politics came with a big promise of freedom, a freedom of some kind, and freedom slogans accompanied, again, taxation cuts, deregulations, privatizations, and the dismantling of welfare and other economic policies. An early critic of Hayek's, Karl Polanyi, warned us a long time ago in this important book that was published in the mid-1940s. Polanyi spoke of a market society, and he criticized Hayek's doctrine, the doctrine that assumes that states' control of the economy is authoritarianism, a denial of freedom. Polanyi had the opposite idea. He wrote, "The freedom that regulation creates is denounced as unfreedom by Hayek. The justice, liberty, and welfare it offers are decried as a camouflage of slavery." So Polanyi thought state is the only organization that provides freedom, that provides progress, that provides wealth and prosperity. But it's under attack by these theories that will lead us to a market society. Markets that, according to Polanyi, were dangerous for community life because they turn humans into commodities. Think of the unquestioned, universally accepted presence of a labor market today, where we're all commodities. So markets, according to Polanyi, produce bad freedoms, such as the freedom to exploit others, to accumulate private wealth to the detriment of community, and to preclude the use of technology for the benefit of common good. So technology is used to generate profit rather than bring progress in the common interest of all. And then he writes, another bad freedom generated by the market is the freedom to profit from public calamities secretly engineered for private advantage. In other words, left completely free to act in an unregulated environment, private actors have the ability to turn every occasion into a wealth accumulation, into a profit-making opportunity, profit that is not then shared, redistributed. So we do live in Polanyi's world. And in America, we are seeing with Trump the arrival of an oligarchy in the buildings of the oldest democracy in the world. So the economy firmly in the hands of a few, the neoliberal agenda can continue to exist. So we are far from entering a post-neoliberal era, like many people are saying. So we see titles like this everywhere. This is an important book by an important historian, Gary Gerstle. And he says that neoliberalism is dead because of Trump. And more specifically, because of Trump's tariffs. And I think this is wrong, not just because Trump is one of the champions of American neoliberalism, if you look at his biography. It's wrong because we are, in that way, mistaking neoliberalism with globalization. They're not exactly the same thing. So the economic formulas of the globalization, which came from neoliberal ideas, we know are flawed and they have failed. We were told that free trade would have brought democratization of certain regimes. It didn't happen, and so on. But the overlapping of the private and public sectors remains. And the imbalance between economic power and political power remains. And so the neoliberal ideology is still very much in control of today's politics, nationally, in America, and in many other places, but also internationally. So half a century of neoliberalism has built a global belief system that, as I said before, has changed us profoundly, has changed the way we understand state. We understand basic concepts like justice, freedom, the role of government, and so on. So we still believe in the superiority of the market of government. We still believe in the mantra of the GDP as the driver of political decisions. We still believe in economics as a scientific, rational discipline that rules over all other domains. And we believe in the cult of the business and technology efficiency. And we adopt the model business in every sector, education included. And we conduct all of our human interactions as transactions, contracts. So these are the dogmas of today, generated in our individualistic Darwinian society. And these are the dogmas that have eroded class solidarity and ultimately democracy. Phenomenons that are well personified by Trump in the West today. And this is neoliberalism. So it is not simply an economic doctrine that is failing, that's failed, but it is a philosophy which rests on the value of greed and the values of competition, and is still very much alive. And this is Harvey, wrote one of the fundamental texts on neoliberalism. Put simply, he says, along with wealth, economic growth, neoliberalization also caused poverty, hunger, disease, and despair. So this culture that I have described, this political agenda that I have described, can also explain the rapid decline of the international liberal order that we are all worried about. We see that there is an attack to multilateralism, basically, and the economic coercion that Trump is imposing on everyone is an example of that. But also the attack on Iran is an example of that. So the complete disregard, lack of respect for international law, for multilateralism, it comes from this predatory logic where the great power subjugates all others and plunders their resources. So there is no attention or respect for the democratic approach of international and regional forums where member states should enjoy equal status. Indeed, those forums are seen as the last bastion of the red tape that neoliberalism want to get rid of. So after targeting national governments for decades with deregulation, liberalization, privatization, now is the time to target the last red tape, the international organizations. So if there is an America that Trump is challenging, that's the America of Roosevelt in 1945, which for a short time believed in this great dream of the international liberal order. The dream of the perpetual peace of Immanuel Kant, a dream that the USA denied for a long time, as I said before, going against that system for a long time. So what is the solution to all these problems? I'll try and wrap it up now. Well, I don't see any solution in sight. I'm not optimistic, but the solution requires a long time and requires the creation of a counter-narrative that challenges that of Friedrich Hayek. Hayek, whose ideas were ridiculed and considered crazy in the 1930s, 20s, and then the 40s and so on, until they became mainstream. So we have to create some ideas that are probably fringe nowadays, but hopefully in the future sometime they will become the mainstream ideas. So I am a former public servant, so you will understand I believe in the superiority of state as the central organization that can manage public life in the best way and provide justice, liberty, welfare, like Polanyi said in the 1940s. So one voice that probably goes in the right direction is that of Mariana Mazzucato, a very proficient and successful author read by many people. Here we see the face of one of her readers. Two concepts stand out from her work. One is the infantilized state. She says years of privatization and devolution have led to the infantilization of governments through the outsourcing of expertise, knowledge, and intelligence. The best and brightest minds today work in the consultancy industry. They're not attracted by the world of politics or public service. And so the public sector cannot generate ideas, cannot innovate anymore, as it did when it was an entrepreneurial state. So that's the other key concept of Mazzucato. States can drive innovation. States can be productive and efficient economic actors. That is because the state is the sole entity that can invest in certain sectors that are not attractive for the private investor. State-owned investments in natural monopolies, social wealth funds that in turn invest in things like research, social housing, startups, education, public infrastructure, and transports, and so on. So the public sector does generate wealth and innovation. It's the entrepreneurial state that we have suppressed with market-based policies and with our aversion for public debt and deficit budgets. This is the story in this book, The American Amnesia. that says that the Americas' unmatched economic success was the result of the entrepreneurial state. But this has faded from collective memory in the States. So anti-state mentality persists, the deep-seated idea that innovation and wealth can only come from the private sector. So we've been taught that public debt is bad, and we consider normal to carry out an existence through private debt. But Mazzucato's entrepreneurial state responds to the necessity of rebalancing that clash between economic and political power that I mentioned before. It is about taking back control of the economy and reestablishing the superiority of the state over the market. And this is easier said than done, because we are, again, pronouncing ideas that are revolutionary, that are unacceptable today. I'm talking about things that are unthinkable, like processes of nationalization, taxation, centralization of power, direct economic intervention, the marketization of several fields of human activities, from education to labor, health services, arts, and so on. And I know this is blasphemy to many ears today, but again, it's probably worth pronouncing this blasphemy in the hope that in a remote future, that balance between common good and private interests will be redirected. That's for the sake of democracy. Because, and to conclude, what I want to convey today is this idea that neoliberalism, even though it was created, within the liberal democracy, is conducive of authoritarianism, is incompatible with democracy. We were told that, again, neoliberal policies and politics are part of democracy, but democracy is now struggling, and we think they're struggling because voters are voting for the wrong people, like these guys in Europe, demagogues, populists. But the real blow to democracy comes from above, comes from those players who control key economic assets. Today is financial, digital finance or digital technologies. And now we know that these people want political power as well. And they're telling us that, like a corporation, a state can be run by a CEO, by one decision maker. And all the other layers of power are just, in excess, and they obstruct the efficiency of the system. Again, the Darwinian society generated this idea, this situation we're in at the moment, this type of oligarchy. And this is the breeding ground for authoritarianism. This is the society that we have inherited from neoliberalism, void of a common public space, as we can see in this photo, void of a common story, void of a sense of unity. It's an Orwellian nightmare in which authoritarianism is real, but is subtle and almost invisible. Neoliberalism means a lot of different things. It will be up to future historians to give this revolution a proper name. But to me, at the moment, this is the best word we have to describe this ideology that triumphed after the Cold War. And an ideology that generated a predatory system, a predatory type of capitalism, denying wealth redistribution and exacerbating the divide between rich and poor, and the ensuing resentments that this divide produces. I will conclude with Frank Kelleter from the Free University in Berlin, who wrote, "Trump is the authentic face of something larger that Western liberalism has no plausible name for, because it concerns Western liberalism itself." So there is no name for this thing yet. I'm calling it neoliberalism. We can call it in many many other names: oligarchy, plutocracy, kleptocracy, or there's an economist, Chiara Cortelli, that calls it privatocracy. Kelleter calls it neo-fascism, and he writes, it is a vicious and oppressive handling of public opinion, again, a social instrument, an instrument of social control. And it is an instrument that subverts liberal democracy's norms and traditions to intensify economic exploitation through corporate-controlled governance. So perhaps our grandchildren will find a way to group all these different isms together in the future, and maybe they will call all this Trumpism one day. And this is all from me today. Thank you so much for your patience, and again, for your patience, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Adriano. I'm sure everybody's joining me with a virtual applause while you get some water to freshen up your vocal cords. A very interesting presentation. I invite everybody to add to the questions that have been sent to me, but I would like them to really use the Q&A. So everything is clear. I'll buy you some time, people that are still there, to do that and ask questions, comments, compliments, whatever in the Q&A, and maybe I kick off with some observations. Yeah, first of all, in defense of economists, and I say this with some sense of dismay, because I'm fully aware of your and to some extent there is really very little one could imagine saying. You did mention one which I was prepared to mention otherwise. So Mariana Mazzucato, of course, has put forward a kind of an alternative way of thinking about not only democratic systems, but the economic functioning of modern states, really putting at the center, as you mentioned in your slide, I think the state that is entrepreneurial, capable of creating value, and then thinking about ways to redistribute value, essentially bringing to light the real work of economics from Adam Smith through Marx and so on, that really was about value creation that could be rather important and significant, because the ultimate question from an economist, if you think that of economics in that light, is essentially to create a system that wouldn't need economics, right? That's what most economy would basically conclude, and by that I would like to make the analogy of what could happen in a world of artificial intelligence. It could really resolve some or many of the issues that you allude to in production, creating equality, even providing individuals with new opportunities to live work as an enriching activity rather than an incredibly task-driven transactional part of our life. So that concept in economics has been completely, if you like, borrowed, if not stolen, by concepts that are more familiar in finance, right? So how to make a buck or how to make more bucks with few bucks, even virtual bucks. So this short comment then becomes a question, which is for me the real question, and I really have asked myself, because there are economists out there. Mariana is clearly the leader of this new wave. There are many others that really see value. They're called extra welfareists, many of them. I certainly subscribe to this group in my little contribution to academia research, and I see some as well here in the audience. So the point here that I want to ask: why is this concept of value interpreted in that way that is really the value that we bring to human life or to life in general, that has become secondary and almost subordinate to the other concept, which is actually maximization of earnings, profits, and revenue, which is just one of the many dimensions that you can associate with value. Certainly, with money, you can buy things, but you can't buy time, you can't buy social interaction, you can't buy fresh air, you can't buy a lot of things that ultimately are factors that improve health, life, education, and so many other aspects. And this is really the fundamental question. There seems not to be a political recipient to that concept. And I ask you your thoughts. Is this because it's too difficult? Because we have reached a human capital that is so corrupt into finances and money driven decision making that is incapable of seeing and attributing value and interpreting in another way? What is it really? Sorry for the long point.
No, Francesco. Yeah, thank you so much. And I am the one who should apologize because I've been talking too much, and I realize that there's not much time left. But if there are questions, I'll be also happy, very happy to write emails or whatever. Anyway, one little comment is, I hope it didn't sound too provocative. I'm not an economist, and I know that the audience today is mostly made of people like you. You know the discipline, you know it very well, and I don't. But I do read some text here and there about the economy because of this really encompassing nature of the discipline that has engulfed our life. So the amazing thing is that politicians today speak in economic terms, maybe poor economic terms, but every time they want to justify something, it's because of the economy, because of the markets, because the markets ask us to do so. Because we need to be good, we need to have a good budget, we need to have a good GDP. And the political jargon has changed radically. If you look at, again, to stick with the example of America, at the speeches of people like conservative presidents like Eisenhower and Nixon, you might think, without knowing that those were the presidents, you might think that certain speeches were pronounced by Bernie Sanders. That's, I think, the miracle of the neoliberal, again, not economic doctrine, but the neoliberal political agenda, which has been, again, making the language, the simple, basic language, which is the language of Trump, of transactions, of markets, of what you mentioned before, profit making, becomes the normal language in every sector. This is what the great sociologist Zygmunt Bauman described in his liquid modernity theory. Everything is dictated by these simple rules. And I worked in the public sector, and to me, I entered as a young person into the machinery of government, realizing this is a huge thing, and with the big ideas of, oh, now I'm part of this great organization that I had to study in, at uni, from Machiavelli on, realizing that the organization I was working from was just a pale imitation of the business, of the corporation, but a pale and bad imitation, because they couldn't do what a proper corporate private actor does. But still, as a public servant, I was asked to use words like products. At the end of the year, I was asked to quantify the products that I generated, and I was a diplomat. I was working for foreign affairs. There are no products there that you can quantify, but still, that's the language, and
that's very interesting.
Yeah, and then a consulate, an embassy, provides services to citizens, either national citizens or foreign citizens. In Australia, like in many other parts of the West, embassies and consulates call citizens clients these days. If you apply for a visa or a passport, you're a client. So it's this pervasive presence of, I call it economic language. Sorry, it's not.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
No, it's fair enough.
The market language.
Let me
It has
go
nothing to
for
do with economic theory.
No,
But,
I understand.
But if
Let
this
me
idea
ask
that
you
we
another
can all be
question, Adriano.
micro CEOs. Yes, Francesco. Sorry. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So from Ali, he asks, congratulates you on the interesting topic. He asks if, in your view, what role social media plays in supporting neoliberal powers in Trump's era.
I think, well, this is very big, difficult, and I know very little about digital technology, media, social media, and all that. But because I'm an old man, I still read the newspapers. But the algorithm, that's the other magic thing. So we created the algorithm, this new product that generates an amazing return for GDP, but for a series of producers. Fantastic. Unregulated, creating a lot of social problems. Those of you who have children, especially if they are teenagers, you know well what I'm talking about. But then, voting, the echo chambers of these social media, people reading just one opinion and getting fixated on just one idea, not understanding the language, the dialectics of democracy, the compromise is gone. And maybe it's because of this social media. And to me, what's amazing is that I might sound too dramatic here, but it's really, I talked about this idea of social control, which very much was the idea of Margaret Thatcher. We need to keep people down, because in the 70s and in the 60s, people were a pain in the butt. We had to stop them from protesting and from having an opinion, from stopping us to do what we need to do, which was, in our case, dismantling the industry or the public sector in England. So we have to keep them down, and so we need to control them somehow. And I think digital media is an incredible, amazing instrument for social control. And again, that's a real photo that I showed you before. I think it's taken in New York, or I don't know where. But people leave in the train station checking their mobile phones, not realizing where they are, and that there are other fellow humans around them. And that's it. We're lost in our own little space. And it's dramatic, especially for the young ones who were born with this thing in their hands. And so again, they're telling us, oh, neoliberalism is gone, doesn't exist anymore. Of course, yeah, we're getting into something new, and this technology is leading us there. But I think this technology was born out of neoliberal ideas, neoliberal needs, and it's making neoliberalism even stronger than it was before. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah,
I don't know if
very good. So I want to conclude with one final point. So one of my first memories, probably as a child, I don't know what mistakes my parents did at the time, but it was from June, I believe June 87 or 88, around there, when from Berlin, Ronald Reagan said directly to Gorbachev, tear down that wall. I think that would have been, I remember seeing the translation from a journalist nobody would know in Italian. That's really my very first vivid memory. And at the time, it was very exciting, and it was a change. And that is, to me, the idea of freedom, right? Taking down walls. Now, you can't make these simple equations, because now we're seeing walls built up again, and you can't say that there is the dissociation. And actually, I see this more as continuity, because in a sense, that bipolar world is what you or dichotomic world is also what you see new neoliberal powers trying to reconstruct and rebuild, to have always somebody against, not thinking of a collaboration or things that are more more or less conflictual. So is that what we are gonna have to expect? Despite the rhetoric, the facts are gonna be that the same that we've seen. The analogies with Reagan and other let's say Republican or neoliberal, as you wish to call them, presidents. Is that what we expect to see, despite the rhetoric of wanting to find peace and solution in Ukraine, the Middle East, and so on? It's in fact really that between the lines we have to read that in fact we're going to see more and more investment in searches for enemies, and that's the world that we have to see and decide whether to play or to be on one side or the other. Like it's almost a condemnation, at least for people that don't want to necessarily compromise with any war. What do you think about this?
It's big, it's huge. There's a lot to say there, but it indeed, those days, I remember them very well, were exhilarating. They were fantastic, and people believed in it, and we believed in it, and we probably still believe in those beautiful words that Reagan was able to formulate. Rocky Balboa formulated those words as well in 1986, right? When he went to Moscow to fight the Russian. But anyway, we loved it, and that's what won the Cold War. That powerful idea of freedom and democracy. But magically, after the wall crashed down, the people who went on that plane to fly from America to Moscow or Eastern Europe to welcome the old enemy inside the liberal, democratic, capitalist, free world were not how can you call them? The policymakers or policy advisors, were economists who immediately taught those people how to turn their societies into markets straight away. That was the first thing, because again, the idea then democracy will follow suit, and it didn't happen. So that's the beginning of that story. But now I think what's going on is another tragic story, which is the story of we the West, we the United States enjoyed this great long run with unipolarity, uncontested hegemony. It's natural, that there is a phase of decline. And rather than leaving this phase of decline, this is what that historian Samuel Moyn writes about again. It's a natural thing in history. The great powers have, they slow down a little bit. But instead of taking this as a natural, normal thing, as Obama seemed to be doing, when was that, 15, 12 years ago, whatever. Trump and even Biden probably, no, keep on insisting, no, we're number one and we will stay number one. That's a dangerous game. That's a dangerous game, because you could simply coexist with new great powers if you could recognize common interests, we have climate change interests today, but also security interests. We have common security interests. We have to avoid nuclear proliferation, but we're going in the other direction again because of this bad idea that we should keep the status quo, things as they are in terms of power. And then you see, again, the economic instruments like tariffs used purely for political reasons, like in the case of Brazil, for example. Anyway, I'm going
no, fantastic. No, thank you.
But
that was great. So Yeah, we're a bit over time, so I thank you
Sorry.
once again, Adriano. We really appreciated your time and contribution, and I want to thank everybody that came today and those who will connect later to look at the recordings. Adriano kindly offered. It's time to follow up. If you want, you can find his email in our advertising for this seminar or webinar. And then we will be happy to welcome you anytime, Adriano, when you want to come for a follow-up in some time. And for all those who will see us or have seen us today, keep looking at what we do. We'll have other seminars coming up shortly, so we look forward to meeting you again. Thank you again, Adriano. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Francesco, and everyone online. And I don't claim to be an expert on anything, but if you want the dialogue to keep going, I'll be more than happy to be in touch with anyone. Thank you again.
Beautiful. Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you.